Hello, I'm Jack and this is Entertainment World, and today I'll be talking about Moon Knight Episode 6, which was directed by Mohamed Diab. The teleplay was by Jeremy Slater, Peter Cameron and Sabir Pizada, and the story was by Daniela Irman and Jeremy Slater. If I've pronounced Sabir Pizada or Daniel Irman wrong, I apologise. Sorry for how long this video has taken. I obviously made the videos on the other 5 episodes. I just never got round to making this one. As you know, I took, if you've watched those other videos, I took a break from doing this for a while. I did a few of my other videos before this one, whereas now I've come back to this. Sorry for how long that has taken, especially considering my video on the first episode came out 5 months ago, because that is when the first episode came out. However, I'm doing it now, sorry. I actually watched all of Moon Knight today before filming this, from the start to the end, to recap on the whole thing, so I can do thoughts on the whole series after this video, and to refresh myself on episode 6, because I hadn't watched it since it came out, which was obviously a few months ago. So I wanted to refresh my memory of it and have my clear thoughts on it and know exactly what I want to say about it, instead of having to try and remember everything. So I wanted to do that, so I watched it all before doing this video. And just so you know though, this is actually my second attempt. I was this close to finishing the video, and then my camera froze and the footage then wouldn't work. So I'm really pissed off about that. So this is my second attempt. I'm going to try and get it all done as quickly as I can. I don't know if I will be able to though, because my battery isn't as good, because obviously I filmed the whole video, got so close to the end, and then the whole thing didn't work. So I'm happy about that. However, I will be trying, hopefully, to get it to work this time. However, I just don't know if I'll be able to do it all today, because, as I said, the camera battery. And also, my grandpa came down last week, which is why there's been a bit of a gap between my last video, which was the Batman deleted scene, my video on that, and this video, because he was here all week. I don't see him often, so I spent every day doing stuff with him. So yeah, sorry, that's another little reason why, for how long this video has taken, especially between the gap between this video and my last video. But yes, this is the last episode in the series. I don't know if it will be the last episode overall, because I don't know if they're going to make another season or not. Either way though, it's the last episode of this season. It's the last episode at the moment, and it wraps up the story thus far quite nicely. So this episode starts off with Arthur Harrow going to Mark Stevens, whichever's body, and retrieving Amit Ushabi. Now, I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I apologise if I'm getting it completely wrong and I'm saying something really stupid. I do apologise. And I was really happy we got to see this, because that's where sort of episode 4 ended on, before cutting to the whole mental hospital aspect of it. So episode 5 was all about Mark, Stephen in the mental hospital, in the afterlife, in the memories, and ending with Mark in the field of reeds and Stephen stranded in the desert, frozen in the sand. So it was nice to finally see, what's actually going on there in that world, because that world hasn't been shown since episode 4. So I was really happy about that. He, as I say, gets Ushabi, goes to leave. Layla's still there though, hiding, and takes out one of Arthur Harrow's guards and proceeds to follow him, where and then he's with his convoy driving through the desert, and they come across a checkpoint where they're stopped, and the armed guards want their papers. Harrow says they don't need their papers, and of course the armed guards then pointing their guns, get ready, yelling, in Egyptian to give them the papers so they can see who they are. Howard then puts his staff down, which is like judges en masse. He's more powerful now, or at least seems to be, and the souls get sucked out of the prison guards who aren't, the armed guards who aren't worthy, and only one of which, who is the one actually directly in front of Harrow, is. And this allows, obviously, Harrow to proceed, although his men clear the bodies first. Layla's there because she's now pretending to be one of the henchmen, because she took the clothes and the mask of the person she killed earlier on, whilst they were still in the tomb of Arthur the Great, and she goes to try to kill Harrow, however is stopped by a dead body. Now that dead body is being possessed by Tara, and this is something I just remembered I wanted to mention but forgot, because I talked about it in my previous attempt and I want to say it here. That whole sequence with the sucking the souls out of the people and the dead body being possessed by Tara and talking to Layla, that's a bit darker and I liked it. And this is what I loved about Moon Knight thus far. Yeah, it did have your typical MC humour in there, and no, it isn't as violent or as dark as like the Netflix Daredevil or Jessica Jones or any of those series were like, but it is a lot darker and more violent than a lot of the recent MCU films, things like that TV series. So I was really happy about that, and this is one of those darker, more intense moments and creepy moments with the possessed body talking to Layla, being possessed by Tara. So I liked that for that. I liked it for that. And Tara basically says to Layla, Mark, you're not strong enough to attack Arthur. Mark says you're not either. You got to let me be your avatar, and it shows her humorous, friendly, bubbly side, and she's like, I'll let you be my avatar. I've heard lovely things about you from Mark, and I thought that was quite funny, but Layla ignores that, but holds off from attacking Harrow, because I think Tara says, you got to free Khonshu first. So she holds off attacking Harrow until she's done that. It then cuts to Mark, who's in the Field of Reeds, and Tara is telling him he can spend all eternity in peace there. And Mark asks about Stephen, and she says he's stuck in the sand, and asks about Layla and says she's fine, she's going to go do this. Mark's like, no, I'm not going to let Khonshu take over Layla. I'm not going to abandon Steve. I'm not doing this. And Tara tries to talk him out, but he leaves and goes back to the sand to try and rescue Stephen. Then there's this nice scene where Mark, sweet, touching, nice, friendly. And then there's this sweet scene where Mark goes to Stephen and talks to him and tells him basically like, Stephen protected him, Stephen saved him, He even though he created Stephen never abandoned him. So even though he created Stephen never abandoned him. He was, always there for him. He was the one who had all the joy, the hope, the happiness. Basically, he always was there for him. He was the one who kept him going. He never abandoned him. And Mark's like, I'm not gonna abandon you now. You saved me. I'm not gonna do it. And he starts to be taken over and frozen and encased in the sand as well. However, before he does so, he gets hold of Stephen's hand, and the heart sort of becomes one and balanced, and the doors of Osiris, hope I'm correct, opens, and they become, they defrost basically, become unfrozen from the sand, and they have a nice reunion. I like that because the series thus far, well, earlier on at least, had shown that they had conflict. A lot of it didn't trust each other, especially Stephen did not trust Mark whatsoever. Hated him, didn't understand what was going on, which was understandable. However, this was a nice moment, especially considering that doors of Osiris open, but in the sand basically becomes a tsunami trying to, sweep them up, and they're having to try and run to the doors of Osiris. And then there's a cool scene where Tara then breaks the sand with the ship she had. And there's a funny scene where Stephen then yells, "Yay, Hippo!" And Mark then tells him to hurry up, and they run through the doors of Osiris. Yeah, that scene does have elements where things just seem to just happen. Like, all of a sudden, now it's balanced, all of a sudden the doors of Osiris just open, and then the sun just starts attacking them, and then Taweret just shows up. But it's a cool scene, it was a very sweet scene, it was, very well done special effects wise, so overall I did enjoy most of that. Meanwhile, Harrow is attacking the base, the Temple of the Gods, which is in the Great Pyramid of Giza. He breaks through, and it looks like he judges the avatars, or at least does something. He hits the ground and they die, or but the avatar I think it's Osiris's avatar who survives it, but is critically injured by what's just happened. And he then breaks Amit's Ashati. Hope I'm saying that right. Freeing her. Layla's there as well, but is keeping disguised and is sort of wandered off to try and find Khonshu's Ashati to break him free. Amit then goes on a really cool, Amit then goes on this speech saying, "Who freed me? Who do I owe my gratitude to?" And Arthur Harrow bows down and is like, "Your humble servant, but you owe nothing." And she says, "You're unbalanced on the scales." And Harrow says, "I accept my fate. I hoped my work I had done here and for you would have pardoned me and balanced out my past discretions. However, I now see that is impossible, so I accept my fate." She says, "It's not things you've done in the past, it's something you will do." And Harrow says, "Well then, the world must be saved and freed from the pain that I will one day cause." And Amit is like, "No, I'm not going to kill you. I want you to be my avatar," which confuses Harrow. And Amit explains that the last avatar she had was perfect on the scales, that being Alexander the Great, and he betrayed her and she ended up entombed. So she doesn't want another one who's perfect. But Harrow says, "You've got thousands of followers that I've gathered who are perfect on the scales, and they'll all be suitable to be the perfect avatar for you." And she says, "I'm not interested in that. I want you, and I want you to serve for me. Your death is delayed. You'll be my avatar and do my bidding." And Harrow says, "As you wish," which just sort of shows the hypocrisy of Amit. But she isn't really all about that perfect justice. She's more about power for her. And that also leads into question, is the scales, the justice, actually justice? Or is it, and this is what I sort of believe, basically her version of "you're worthy" or "you are worthy" is, will you follow her? Will you agree to her power? Will you, fully devote yourself to this? Are you fully in it? I sort of believe that's more what the scales represent, or represent power for her more than actual justice. And have they done bad? Will they do bad? Or have they always done good, and will they always do good? I think it's more selfish and more based on power. That's what I personally believe is the reality of what she's actually doing. And that just shows the hypocrisy, shows how I was fully committed and willing to die himself. However, it didn't take much persuading for him to go, "Alright, fuck it, break the rules, I'm now your avatar." So, shows he's a bit hypocritical as well and doesn't follow that. Layla breaks Khonshu's Abshati and frees him. He says we've got to stop. He says, I don't sense Mark in this world. I guess he's died fighting, which angers Layla. He then says to her, we've got to stop Amit, and you will be my avatar. I've always wanted you to be my avatar. And Layla says no. She doesn't trust him because Mark didn't trust him, and I like that. She's, even though their last interaction was her being really furious with Mark, because Mark, even though he isn't the one who killed her dad, he was involved in his death. It was nice that she's using Mark as a reason to not trust Khonshu, and how she says, you made his life a living torment. And he says, well, we need an avatar to capture entomb Amit. We need an avatar. And she says, I told you no. And he gets fed up and leaves. She then finds if I say these out of exact order, I apologise. I'm just sort of going with what I remember. She finds Osiris's avatar, who she tries to rescue, and he says, she's like, we've got to entomb Amit, and he says, we don't have enough avatars to do that, and then dies. She then says, Taweret, are you there? And Taweret then takes over the body of Osiris's avatar, and she agrees to be her avatar then. Meanwhile, Khonshu confronts Amit, and they have quite a cool discussion about their motives. Khonshu says he's true justice. He only punishes people after the fact. He doesn't just basically kill people. He deems unworthy. He waits until they do. He only harms the bad people. He waits until people do wrong and then punish them. Whereas Amit's like, no, I punish people before they've even had the chance to commit evil. And again, like I said, she's shown her hypocrisy, which Khonshu actually points out by saying, well, if that's really the case, you have a avatar who is unbalanced on the scales, and he's making his point, and Harrow tells the men, his followers, to not listen to him. He's just trying to, disillusion their perfect thing, and he says he's not alone. Go find the one who, freed Khonshu, being Layla. His soldiers then start looking for her. Khonshu is still arguing with Amit though, and, talking about what justice means, and she says, not much, there isn't a lot of belief in you. Basically, he's weak, because not many people believe in him compared to how many people believe in her, and he calls her a fool. They start to fight, and Amit is winning that fight, very much so, and Layla gets sort of half taken over by Taweret, and there's this really nice moment where Taweret, during her taking over of her, is saying, oh, I'm going to tell your dad all about this. He'll be over the moon to find out about this. And she goes, you know my dad? And she says, yes, I took him to the Field of Reeds many moons ago. He'll be absolutely thrilled to hear about all of this. Which was very sweet, and obviously because the dad would be very proud of her and love this, because he was the really well-known archaeologist who loved all of this stuff. So of course he would be really happy to hear what his daughter's doing with her life. So I really enjoyed that motive, and there's this sweet also a little line where Taweret says, I've got the perfect costume for us, and before lots of rubble collapses on them. Meanwhile, Mark and Stephen, with Mark being the one in control, get their body back, and it's got the bullet holes in it though. And Khonshu senses though that Mark's back, and goes to back to Arthur the Great's tomb. It then sort of cuts to the audio of Khonshu's initial speech saying, I feel your pain. Will you protect the Travellers of the Night? All of that from the previous episode, which is when Mark first became Moon Knight. And it's cool how it flashes between the footage of all of that and his past memories with that, and it shows him become Moon Knight again, and it's really cool, just like how it was the scene where in the previous episode where he became Moon Knight for the first time was really cool. I loved seeing it. And Mark then rises up and is Moon Knight again. He then leaves the tomb to outside where Khonshu's waiting, and Khonshu says, "I know you'd miss me. I knew you'd miss me." And then he becomes Stephen. He says, "Stephen, I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to Mark." And Stephen says, "Well, we did just save your life, you know, so you're welcome. Also, before we go anywhere, I just want to know what the deal is." And he's like, Khonshu's like, "Deal?" And he says, "Yeah, because, you know," also he'd also previously said, when he says, "I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to Mark," he says, "Well, we are part of, you know, like a combined baggage now. It's a sort of like 2-for-1 deal." And he says, "You know, what's the deal with this?" And he says, "Really? You're doing a deal now?" And he says, "Well, I did learn from the best." And Khonshu says, "Fine, after this I promise to release you both." Seems like, I like the sound of that. And I love that, because when Stephen, you know, is first introduced, the audience follows him, and he's terrified, he has no idea what's going on. He's terrified of Khonshu, finds him absolutely horrifying. And I just loved seeing him become confident, argue back to Khonshu and demand a deal before he said he would even try and help him. And I enjoyed that. However, he's still too scared to fly, so Mark takes over the body, and they fly away. It then cuts to what had been sort of happening earlier with Layla. Like I said, if I didn't get the exact order right, I apologise. By this point, Amit is now outside of the temple, outside of the pyramid, with Arthur on top, and the followers are running rampant and judging people, and the whoever obviously isn't worthy is dying, and Harrow starts to also judge people and collect their souls, which he then feeds to Amit as she starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which sort of proves the point where it's also about power, getting bigger, becoming more and more of a god, and shows that she isn't really in it for true justice, she's just a hypocrite. And Khonshu and Moon Knight arrive, as well as Layla freeing herself from the rubble in a really cool suit which has 2 metal golden armoured wings, which I thought was absolutely cool. It looks really like great, and they're also blades, which I thought was fantastic. And this really great moment where Moon Knight, Mark, is running up the pyramid, and Harrow sees him and is like, you know, you're back, and runs down the pyramid. They start having a fight, which then leads to the streets of Cairo, and Layla is there as well, fighting Harrow's men, soldiers, and Khonshu and Amit start having a big kaiju monster level battle. Now, I know a lot of people did not want this series last episode to just be this big, huge CGI like action fest, and I understand why they wanted something a bit more psychological and character depth, and I understand that, and I agree on a lot of levels with that. However, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I did not want the twist of this to be that it's all in its head, that he's just some crazy guy in an asylum. I didn't want that, so I was, even though I understand why in a lot of ways it's disappointing that this is what the final was, I'm glad it was this opposed to just all being in his head. I am glad with that in a way. Also, when you look at what the budget and effects for what a lot of TV series used to be, there were a few exceptions, but for a lot of them, and especially with a lot of like superhero TV series which came out before this and before like the big streaming thing with Disney Plus and all of that, effects-wise, it was very good. The big Khonshu fighting the big Amit and the big battle with Layla, Moon Knight versus Harrow and his followers, I think it looked cool. It all looked great, especially, considering, as I've mentioned, what TV series budget, especially comic book TV series, had been like beforehand. So, yeah, it did look cool. Yeah, I understand some people didn't want the big sort of like Godzilla versus King Kong type battle between the two of them, but I think for all intents and purposes, it looked cool, effects-wise, and was entertaining to watch. But I really, really enjoyed the fight scene between with Layla and Mark and Steven versus Harrow and his followers. I love it when they sort of like join together, and it cuts to Steven and he's like, "Wow, look at you, you look great, your suit looks fantastic." And he says, "I've also got a new skill set I'm super excited to show you," because he's realised he knows how to fight, and he's in Mr. Knight's attire, and he's got his two batons, and he starts having a huge fight with Harrow's followers with his batons, and I absolutely love that sequence because it reminds me a lot of Daredevil. Is it as violent as the Netflix Daredevil TV series, dark as brutal? No, it isn't, because there isn't blood, there isn't like loads of bones breaking, and it's set in the dark, and it feels very bare bones, knuckles, and realistic. It doesn't feel like that, but it does feel like a light version of it. And especially as we know we're getting Daredevil back, Daredevil will be in She-Hulk. Not watched any She-Hulk, I'll be completely honest, not really interested in it. And with what I've seen of it on like the internet and clips and stuff, I'm just like, this doesn't really interest me, it looks a bit shit, just my opinion. And we also know Daredevil was back in No Way Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home, and he may be appearing in Echo, as well as the fact he is getting his own series, Daredevil Born Again, and we also know Fisk has come back in Hawkeye. He will be in Echo and Deadpool Born Again. So, it just reminded me of that, and I thought it was cool. And I sort of liked that they were going back down that sort of baton, hand-to-hand fight combat, especially, like I said, as it reminded me of Daredevil, just not as brutal, like the Daredevil light version of it. And I love when he chucks the baton, it gets chucked back at him, and then it shows it's Mark who catches it. He's in the proper ceremonial Moon Knight gear. I love that, and I love the fight between Mark and Arthur Harrow, and because they'd had a lot of confrontations up until that point. However, they've never gone to equal match, power to power. Well, not equal match as such, because Dr. Harrow is more powerful than Mark in that moment. But at least them actually having a proper fist-to-fist fight using their powers. I really enjoyed that, and Arthur's using his staff, which has got Amit's power in it. I love that fight. There's this really cool moment where Layla saves her family from the collateral damage Harrow is causing, and one of the younger girls from the family asks her, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" To which Layla says, "Yes, I am," and continues fighting. Well, they say that in Egyptian. Now, it's a little bit on the nose, and it isn't the best version of something like that I've seen. However, it isn't the worst, and it was a nice little sweet moment, and it was cool they put it in and acknowledged, an Egyptian superhero. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then, though, it's very clear that Mark is losing the fight with Harrow. Mark says a really brutal line of if Amit was in charge, your family would have been happy, your younger brother would have been alive. All they would have had to do is get rid of one little weed, you. And I thought, fuck you now, that's brutal, but it was a good, evil line. Layla starts to get pinned down by Harrow's soldiers, and she's stuck. And then Harrow pins Mark down and gets the staff and puts it to his chest, and it starts to suck his soul out. And then it does that thing which I loved in the earlier episodes where Mark does that thing where his eyes twitch for a second, the camera goes weird, showing he's about to switch to somebody else, and then shows him upright in this really, one of my favourite bits of the whole series. He's all of a sudden looking around, and he has stabbed Harrow through the forehead. Hasn't killed him, but certainly rendered him incapable of really doing anything. Stabbed him through the forehead with the axe part of his staff, and I was like, holy fucking shit, that is amazing. And there's like 20 dead of Harrow's followers around them, and Layla was like, Mark, what the hell was that? And he says, I don't know what that was. I blacked out. They then see, though, Ammit defeating Khonshu, and Layla says, look, I know how to defeat him, come on, let's go. So, obviously, Khonshu and Ammit are still fighting, but Layla and Mark manage to do the spell to imprison Ammit, and Ammit is, begging Khonshu, saying it could have been their paradise together, because throughout the episode, during their fight, she had tried to persuade Khonshu to join her side, because obviously they both somewhat stand for the same thing, supposedly that being justice. However, I mean, both of them have a weird sort of idea of right and wrong and justice anyway. However, it obviously mentioned clearly Ammit's a hypocrite, and her way of judging people doesn't really work. So, yeah, Khonshu's like, yeah, fuck off. And so Ammit then gets imprisoned into Harrow, and I was like, that's quite cool. Khonshu becomes smaller Khonshu and tells Mark to kill Arthur to destroy both, which Mark goes to, gets one of his the moon crescent knife things, and goes to stab him, but then decides against it, which was good. And it was good that him and Stephen have like moved past this and moved past just doing Khonshu's bidding, and just, especially on Mark, with just sort of blindly doing what Khonshu tells him. And they don't kill him, and they're like, the deal's over, we're done now. And I like that. It then cuts to basically the mental asylum thing again, with Mark and Stephen this time, but Mark being them sort of sharing the body, and they ask Dr. Harrow, what would you say if do you believe in Khonshu, Ammits and all of that? And he says, no, I don't. And he says, what if we disagree with you, Doc? And he says, well, we still have work to do then. But then you notice there's blood on the floor, because in the first episode, Harrow had filled his shoes with broken glass. And Steve and Mark appear and say, I can't remember which one asks, do you see that? But he says, yeah, I do. He says, clearly you don't know as much as you think you do, because Dr. Harrow asks, well, am I bleeding? I did think it was weird though, however, thinking about it, how at the end of, when he basically wakes up from Dr. Harrow's dream thing, he says, I think we'd rather be, save the world, be superheroes, and it's like, well, you just give up your Khonshu power. So I'm confused about that. If they're just going to do it dressed up as Moon Knight, I don't know. But yeah, I just thought that was a bit of a weird thing anyway. They then wake up in bed. Mark says to Stephen, I can't believe you live in this shithole, basically, and it does that thing again where he gets up but forgets his legs being tied up and just falls flat on his face, and ends with him going, ugh. And just because he goes to look up and goes, oh, and he just headbutts the ground. That's that. So that's the main episode itself, and then of course there's the mid-credit scene where Harrow's now in a mental asylum, I think in Egypt. He's clearly got brain damage, or at least it's heavily implied he has, because obviously he got stabbed in the forehead with the axe part of his staff. And he spills his coffee over, and one of the workers there, the care workers, says, "Okay, time for bed." But then you just see two gloved hands say, I'll do it from here, thank you." And he takes him and starts to walk out the door, and Harrow looks over and sees one of the workers, the care workers there, has been killed and is lying in a pile of blood. So, another good MCU dark moment. The figure puts Harrow in the back of a limo type car and then just dumps the wheelchair, and then Harrow goes to inside the car, and Khonshu's sitting there in his suit, which is quite similar to Stephen's when Stephen is Mr. Knight. They start talking, and then there's the really good reveal with Khonshu saying, "I don't know why I can't believe Mark ever thought I would actually want his wife Layla to be my next Avatar, when he's such a good fit himself." And this confuses Harrow. He says Mark doesn't realise how damaged he truly is. "Say hello to my friend Jake Lockley." And he then Jake Lockley reveals himself and proceeds to shoot Harrow to death before driving away. I love that mid-credit scenes. Fans of Moon Knight have been waiting for Jake Lockley's reveal throughout the whole series. I believe there's been hints at it. Well, obviously there's the bits where it was more violent, like when he kills people, like on the two occasions, one in episode 3 where he stabbed everybody, and then again in episode 6 where he killed all of Harrow's followers and stabbed him through the head with the axe. And what I love about that is the violent side, who is much happier working for Khonshu, wasn't part of that agreement where Khonshu's, "I'll let you go." He hasn't let Jake Lockley go, so he's still using Jake Lockley to be the Moon Knight. And I just love that, and it's the true violent, likes killing people side. And there was also a bit of a hint at him at episode 4, where they, when Stevens is stuck in that tomb in the mummified, as a mummy, there's the other one which is also rattling, but they don't open, and that's presumed to be, Jake Lockley. Either way, though, it was a great reveal. Negatives of this episode: yeah, it does wrap things up quite quickly. Yes, it is just more of a generic CGI action fest than what a lot of this series had been beforehand. Yeah, it's a bit confusing with the mental hospital thing. I'm guessing originally that was all part of him finding his two hearts, like that was all a way to discover himself, and he was just using people he knew, had met in real life, and turned them into people in something he relates to, that being a mental asylum. And then that was just a dream, with that whole bit where he's like, "No, actually we are sane, we're not crazy as such," or at least accept what bits of them are crazy and just work with it. So I did enjoy that. So yeah, I guess it wraps up a little bit like that. That works. Not really sure what happened to Layla, as I'll be honest. So interesting there. Yeah, there are negatives, and yeah, it does have some of the typical MCU humour, and there are a few things where it does feel like things just happen. However, on the whole, I'm glad it wasn't all in his head. I like the action. Of course, the cast are great. Oscar Isaac is brilliant, both as Steve and as Mark, Stephen and as Mark. And obviously he's only Jake Lockley very briefly. But again, even though those few moments, it still feels like you're looking at a different character, despite it also being Oscar Isaac. So he's managed to play those characters really well and make them all feel different and look different and come across very differently. Ethan Hawke again is great as Arthur Harrow does come across as a good, sinister villain, especially now when he goes full power crazy person, and he was still like the kind, nicer, but somewhat firm Dr. Harrow. Brilliant as both of those still. May Kalawari, I hope I'm saying that right. Great as Layla again. I want to see her in more projects, and I want to see her character expanded upon in the MCU. She's great in the role, so I really enjoyed that. F. Murray Abraham, who voices Concha again, gives him the good, deep, booming, and authoritative voice. Antonia Salib is, again, voices Tara. Nice, bubbly personality, nice listening to. She had the perfect voice and character for the role. Yeah, the entire cast is just great. I'm not sure how to say it, so I'll just put it here and I apologise, but the voice actress of Amit, again, perfectly casted, great voice for the character and just suited the overall presence she gave and her motive, as well as her personality, just very well casted from a voice acting perspective. Overall, the whole series I enjoyed. I did enjoy this episode. Yeah, still a few negatives. Still think some things feel a bit too open-ended. However, I look forward to the character, be it in another series, be it a film, crossing over other people. I really love Oscar Isaac as a character. I really love the character. This is the one thing where I like what the MCU are doing with the character. I like that he actually has powers and is got an Egyptian god in his head. He's not just a crazy vigilante person. I like that, and I look forward to this world being explored more in the MCU, the Rogues Galleries being expanded upon, and just his overall interaction with other characters, whoever they may be. So I did enjoy the episode. Episode quality, I'm going to give it an 8.25 out of 10, and entertainment value, I'm going to give it an 8.75 out of 10. Did enjoy the episode. Mohammed Diab did a really good job with this series overall, in my opinion. It's one of the better MCU things, and I did really enjoy it. So yeah, I enjoyed the episode. I recommend you watch this episode, especially if you watched the other ones. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it. My next video will probably be the Morbius video and then the Doctor Strange one. That's probably the order I'm going to do it. Hope you watch those ones and any other videos I do make. And if you did enjoy this video, please also think about watching some of my older videos as well. I would massively appreciate that. I hope you all have a good day. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you in my next video. Again, I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.